dose number 2 of Pfizer yesterday. So I'm about 10 hours out, 12, almost 24 hours from dose number 2. And I have a sore arm again today, just like I did after the first one, and really no other symptoms. So dose 2 is going well so far. But I did want to talk just a couple minutes, and we wanted to come up with a presentation talking about the new COVID vaccines, which are mRNA vaccines, talking a little bit about the fact versus fiction. So everyone reads all kinds of things on social media, and just trying to look at some of those facts about COVID vaccine, what it is, what it does, but also what it doesn't do, and some of the myths, and making sure everybody is aware of that. So first off, just go through a list of all the different vaccines that are being trialed right now. Of course, the 2 that we're going to talk about today is the Moderna and the Pfizer, but there's several other vaccines that are out there in trials and getting close to the end of that phase 3 trial. And really, we want and we need all of these vaccines to be successful. So I'm really hopeful that all of these are. There are 300 million people in the United States. 2 vaccine companies alone are not going to be able to produce enough product to vaccinate everybody in this country, let alone the world. So we need as many vaccines as we can get. So we're looking at the research, not just with Pfizer and Moderna, but with all of them. And hopefully we'll see more vaccines pass their phase 3 trial and get approved later this year. We're talking a little bit about mRNA vaccines. They are the new generation of vaccines. I say new, but they've also been studied for over 20 years. This is just the first vaccine that we've been able to get an emergency use authorization from the FDA, and we were able to do that quickly for a lot of different reasons. First off, when you look at the difference, the Pfizer and Moderna trials, there is over 40,000 people enrolled in the Pfizer trial, over 30,000 people enrolled in the Moderna trial. And so very quickly, we were able to get some data. There are several cases of COVID in the trials, but as you can see, in the Pfizer side, only 8 cases in the vaccine arm, and the rest of the cases were all in the placebo arm. Moderna side, there were 11 cases in the vaccine arm and 185 cases in the placebo. So as you can see, very, very quickly, we were able to see, okay, this is 94, 95% efficacy at protecting against getting COVID. And also severe cases, there was in the Pfizer side, there was only 1 severe case, and on the Moderna side, there were none. So not only does it protect against getting COVID, but it also protects very, very well against getting a severe case of COVID. And the reason we were able to get this data so quickly, I know a lot of people's concerns are this is a rushed vaccine. It's actually been studied for 20 years, and I'll go into that in just a minute. But also there's a couple things that we need when we start testing a medication or a vaccine is we need people willing to enroll in the trial. And there was no worries about that in these vaccine trials. We had thousands, tens of thousands, if not more, people that were interested and willing to enroll in these trials. So very quickly, they got the enrollees that they needed for these trials. And then also, we need people to be exposed to the disease. So when we look at some of these vaccines, look at an example of a rabies vaccine, there's just not a lot of people diagnosed with rabies in a year. So to test a rabies vaccine, it takes 10, 15, 20 years to develop that vaccine because there's just not a lot of disease in the community to see how effective it is. Unfortunately, with COVID, there's a lot of disease in the community. There's a lot of disease in the United States and in the world. So the people that got the vaccine, a lot of them were healthcare workers and they were exposed to the disease, so that we were able to see very quickly that those that actually got the vaccine and not just the placebo didn't get sick and did not end up getting COVID from that. So couple is kind of that perfect storm. We have a lot of disease. We have a lot of people enrolled in the trials. We already had the vaccine that we were working on. They had some of that information already. And so it was a very quick process, but it did go through all of the steps that it needed to go through to be reassured that it's safe. Talking a little bit about mRNA and what is mRNA exactly. The mRNA, this particular mRNA for the COVID vaccine, it codes for a specific spike protein on the outside of the COVID virus. So when you look at a COVID virus particle, you see those little red spikes there. That's what that mRNA sequence codes for, is just those little spikes on the outside of the COVID virus. And those little spikes are needed to get that virus into our cells. So that those little spikes are used to get through that cell membrane. So what the mRNA does, back when we had the SARS and the MERS outbreak over 20 years ago in China, they actually isolated that mRNA um, sequence for that spike protein, because there's also the spike protein on the SARS and MERS, because they're both coronaviruses also. So they had already identified that spike protein. They knew what the mRNA sequence was. However, SARS and MERS did not end up being a pandemic. So the funding kind of dried up for that to continue to develop that vaccine, because we didn't need it anymore. There were no SARS, there's no MERS, it's still not going around. So they had the sequence, they had that spike protein isolated. So when COVID-19 came about earlier this year, they were able to go back to that research and pull out all that research, get that started again, identify that the spike protein on this COVID-19 virus is the same as the one on the SARS and MERS, and then they could pick up right where they left off. So that's one reason why it did go so quickly also. But when you look at mRNA and how it's developed, if we go back to junior high or high school biology, your DNA is all coiled up. This gives you the genetic component for anything and everything that your cell makes. That sits in the nucleus of your cell. And then your DNA is transcribed into a long RNA sequence that will transcribe just a certain part of your body or a certain part of a protein or enzyme that you need. And then that RNA gets transcribed into what's called messenger RNA, and that's for one specific protein. That messenger RNA then goes outside of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. It connects to a little ribosome, and then it makes that protein that your body needs, and then it sends that protein off to where it needs to go. So as you can see, this is a one-way street. There is no way we don't have any enzymes in our cells to go backwards and to get that mRNA back into the nucleus and to get back into the DNA. Our body does not work that way. Now, we do have enzymes in the cytoplasm that once that mRNA makes that little protein, the enzymes in the cytoplasm break down that mRNA because they don't need all that extra stuff in the cytoplasm. So that mRNA gets into the cytoplasm, makes that one specific protein, and then that cell breaks down that mRNA, and then those proteins are available to be used for what the cell needs. So that's just kind of that synthesis of an mRNA, and we're going to focus on that mRNA particle is how the vaccine was made. So what they were able to do is actually isolate that mRNA sequence for just that spike protein on the outside of that COVID particle. They encapsulate that mRNA into a little lipid nanoparticle. And the reason they have to put it in basically a little piece of fat, is that's how that piece of fat then gets that mRNA into our cell. It can't cross the cell membrane without having that little bit of a fat encapsulating the mRNA. So that mRNA piece goes into our cell, makes those little spike proteins, just the protein, not the whole virus itself. And then our body recognizes those spike proteins as foreign, and it makes a bunch of antibodies and T cells, which become our body's memory to that spike protein. And so we have those antibodies now made. And then if we are exposed to COVID in the future, it will recognize those spike proteins on the outside of a COVID virus, and it will start making those antibodies in full force to fight that infection. So that is kind of a quick summary on how the mRNA vaccine works. And we know that it works well and it's really effective. We have those trials from last year. And they're ongoing trials. So I don't want anybody to think that these trials are done and they're just not monitoring anything. They are continuing to monitor all of the people that were in the trials. So a couple of the facts on the mRNA vaccine that I want to just make sure everybody is aware of, that side effects are common and they're an expected side effect. So we don't want people to think they're going to get this vaccine and they're going to go away and there's not going to be any potential side effects. So just so everyone is aware, and most of the side effects that we're seeing with the mRNA, the thought is it's actually that little fat particle, that little lipid nanomolecule is what our body reacts to. We're just reacting to that little piece of fat. So even without the mRNA in that fat molecule, you can still have a reaction to it. So common reactions: a sore arm at the injection site. You can even have a little bit of a red rash around where the injection was, fatigue, muscle aches, tiredness, some joint pain, headaches, and fever. Those are all common side effects. They're very expected. They may be a little bit more after that second vaccine because that's your body making that immune response. However, the COVID vaccine typically does not cause respiratory symptoms. So it should not cause the cough, the congestion, the shortness of breath, the chest pain, and those things. So those would not be an expected side effect. The side effects usually last a couple of days and then they go away. The next fact is we don't have long-term data on the vaccine. We don't know for sure exactly how long it lasts. The data we're seeing, it looks like it's going to last at least a year, if not longer, but it's not been a year yet that we can for sure say that how long it's going to last. So that's very much a limiting factor, but that's why they're continuing to follow people through the trial. We have the first people in the trial got vaccinated in July of last year. So we're getting 6 months worth of data now. We're not seeing any major side effects. We had over 70,000 people in the trial to know. We've had almost 10 million people in the US vaccinated with these vaccines as of yesterday's data. So we have a lot of people that's gotten the vaccine. And so we're starting to know what some of the side effects are and what are some things to look for. But we also know the risk of getting COVID virus, getting infected with COVID itself. We're getting close to 2 million global deaths. There's a lot of long haulers from COVID that we're still continuing to follow. Even in our office, 10 to 20% of people that recover from COVID still have long-term sequelae weeks and months later. And of course, the whole economic and the social and the mental loss that we've had from having to wear masks and social distance, stay away from people. We want to get things open back up. And this vaccine is one huge step to getting that to happen. So we do have to weigh the risk versus benefit, getting the vaccine versus and getting things open back up versus any risks that we're seeing. And so one thing that we are keeping a really, really close eye on is what are the vaccine reactions? What are people seeing? So after the first 2 million doses were given, they had the reports that there were 29 confirmed cases of anaphylaxis. So that is a very rare but side effect that we need to be aware of. And of the 21 cases that they reviewed, 18 of them had a documented allergy. So, and 7 of those 21 had actually had anaphylaxis in the past. So anyone with a history of anaphylaxis, history of allergies, they really should be monitored after the vaccine. Almost all the severe reactions do occur within 30 minutes of getting the vaccine. So if they have that history, need to talk with their doctor and make sure that they're monitored closely. But it is still recommended that they get the vaccine. There's a couple safety monitoring systems in place because the CDC, the government, they want to know if there's any adverse reactions because we need to be able to study that to tell, is it the vaccine that's caused that? Is it something else? What is going on with any side effects of the vaccine? So when you get your vaccine, you'll be given a little QR code to sign up for the V-Safe. And that's a texting system. It will text you every day and then every week to see how you're feeling after the vaccine, and you can report any potential side effects that you're having or any symptoms that you think may be related to the vaccine. And then there's also the vaccine adverse reporting event system through the CDC that anyone at any time can go onto that website and report any adverse or possible adverse reactions. And they are looking into all of these. So we want to make sure that the vaccine is safe, and we're continuing to monitor that. Next question, I know this was brought up a little earlier. If you've already had COVID, do you still need the vaccine? And they are saying yes, because we don't know how long immunity from a natural infection lasts. That natural immunity varies from person to person, where we know the immunity given from the vaccine is more constant. It's more uniform response. So once you are recovered from COVID, it is recommended that you get the COVID vaccine if you fall into one of those tiers that has offered it. So you should get that. The next fact is that there's little data in children, and that's very true. The trials did not include children. Both Pfizer and Moderna have started trials in children 12 and up, so we hopefully will have data later this year. But children can still get COVID. They can be hospitalized, although it's more rare. But we are thinking that COVID children may be more of a carrier of COVID, so protecting those that are around kids. And I think that's why the schools were put into this 1B tier is the kids, they don't themselves get super sick with COVID, but we want to protect the staff and the people that are at the schools that could potentially get really sick from COVID. So definitely there are not a lot of trials, there's not a lot of data in children, but that data in those trials are ongoing. So Pfizer's been approved for anyone over 16 at this time. Moderna was approved for anyone over 18. And little data on pregnant women, that is a fact. They were not included as part of the trials, although as part of the trials, several women did become pregnant and enrolled in the trials. So they do have that data. When you enroll in the VSafe, to document your side effects after you get the COVID vaccine, they will ask if you are pregnant because they are really monitoring. They're trying to collect data on women in pregnancy. The American College of OBGYN has said to not withhold the vaccine due to pregnancy because we know that women who get COVID while they're pregnant do worse than if you were not pregnant. So they don't want to withhold it, but we just don't have a lot of data yet. So that is definitely worth a conversation to have with your OBGYN if you are pregnant and qualify to have that COVID vaccine. And then the next question that I got, are the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines developed using fetal cell lines? And both Pfizer and Moderna do not require the use of any fetal cell cultures in order to produce the vaccine. So they are ethically uncontroversial by the Pro-Life Policy Organization of the US. And then all the Vatican, the US bishops, and even the Toledo Diocese have all put out statements to support getting the COVID vaccine when you are able, because they do not use fetal cell cultures to make either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccines. And each vaccine is just a little different, and there is good, the US, the Vatican, and Toledo Diocese has a lot of information about all the different COVID vaccines, but Pfizer and Moderna are both ones that are not, do not use fetal cells in their production of the vaccine. And so a couple myths that we hear a lot, that the mRNA will change your DNA, and that's just not true. As we kind of talked about the process of the cells, the DNA in the cells making the mRNA, that is just, there's no way for an mRNA to go back into the nucleus and alter the DNA. That's just a backwards process from our normal cell. That's not what the mRNA does. The mRNA solely makes the protein for that S protein in the case of the COVID virus, and then our body makes the antibodies against that. So there's no way that mRNA piece can actually get into that nucleus. It just doesn't happen that way. A couple other myths, that the COVID vaccine will give you COVID, and that's not true. If you go back to those expected side effects, yes, people can have side effects from the vaccine. We know that that's going to happen, but it's not a live virus. It's not a live vaccine. It's not even virus fragments. There is no way that vaccine can give you COVID. Now, can you be exposed to COVID right around the time you get your vaccine? Absolutely. So if you have respiratory symptoms, even though you've gotten that first dose of vaccine, you still need to consider COVID in your diagnosis, because you are not considered fully protected until you're 2 weeks after that second dose. And it's still 95% effective. So we still have that 5% of people that will not be protected with the COVID virus vaccine. So we still, if it looks like COVID, if it smells like COVID, we still need to consider COVID even for those that have been vaccinated. So, but the vaccine itself does not give you COVID. And then the other myth I hear a lot about is the COVID vaccine can microchip you. They don't make microchips that small. If you look at the size of the needle for these vaccines, I didn't even feel the shot yesterday. I had to look and see, did she really even give it to me? Because I just didn't feel it at all. The microchips just are would have to be super, super small, that's not even possible. People hear that hydrogel nanotechnology, and those are those lipid nanoparticles that mRNA has to sit in. And that's what people hear that term and think of microchipping, and that's not what that is at all. Another myth is that I've heard is that the mRNA vaccine will cause infertility, and that's not true. And the myth that I've read is that that spike protein is similar to a protein that's on the placenta, and it's going to make people infertile by getting that vaccine. And while those proteins may look kind of similar, that's like saying that an apple looks like an orange. They're not, they're both fruit, they're both proteins, but they really are not that similar that there's going to be any reaction or any chance of infertility with this COVID vaccine. Couple of things that we have seen: women who did get the COVID vaccine in the trials did go end up getting pregnant. So we know that people have successfully gotten pregnant after the vaccine. And the same spike protein is on the COVID virus itself. So all the women that have gotten infected with the COVID virus itself, we are not seeing an increased chance of infertility from being infected with COVID. So there is no basis of that that the mRNA vaccine will cause infertility. We're just not seeing that happen. And now the next myth is we're going to get that vaccine 2 weeks after that second vaccine. We can throw this mask off, throw it away. We can go out in public, go eat at restaurants, cough, sneeze all over everybody because we're good. Unfortunately, that's not true either. I'm going to go back to the Swiss cheese model that I think Julie Loft had shared months and months and months ago. We're way down here at the end at this vaccine here, which is great. But as Joy has talked about, we need more product available. We need more vaccine available. We need more people to get vaccinated to get closer to that herd immunity before we're going to be able to get rid of some of these other layers of the Swiss cheese. So for right now, it is just one more layer of that Swiss cheese until we can get closer to that herd immunity and we start to see cases go down, deaths go down, and hospitalizations go down. So we are getting there. I feel like this is one huge step to that point, but that's not going to be the last step to be able to rip your mask off. And then talking just a little bit about herd immunity. This is kind of where we are right now. One person that's infected, and you can see how it just kind of spreads through everyone. We're starting to see a few people get vaccinated to protect them, but it's not enough. Once we reach that herd immunity, you get someone that gets infected, they may infect another person. But there's enough people vaccinated, there's enough people that have immunity that they're not going to be able to continue to spread that. So this is where we're headed. This is where we are right now. So we are just not quite there, but this vaccine is one huge step to getting there. And then talking a little bit just more about mRNA vaccines. Like I said, these have been studied for over 20 years. There's been a rabies mRNA vaccine that's in clinical trials and has been for years, but we just don't see a lot of rabies infections. So for them to actually get that to market, it's going to take years to get enough data to know that that's effective or not. They've been trialing mRNA vaccines against influenza, identifying a protein that's on an influenza virus so that we don't have to keep making new vaccines and try to figure out what strains may be common for the year. So this would be more uniform. They've been working on those for several years now, and also for cancer research. There's been a lot of research done on mRNA vaccines to help treat cancer. So it's actually new and upcoming and very exciting. And this is kind of the new wave of a lot of research and treatment.